The race begins. Scorpus and Andrea work in tandem, with Scorpus ultimately taking the lead.
Now it's you again.
As Kwame steps out into the arena, Kala breaks down in tears for her only son, praying for his survival. Domitian is thrilled as the first two gladiators are quickly subdued. Now it's Kwame against Flamma. Exhibiting remarkable skill, Kwame handles the colossal Flamma with the assistance of the frequent tremors, impressing the crowd, who begin to chant his name.
The lion that protects our family.
Kwame and his sister manage to redirect the lion's attention to him, facing off the angry beast. Welcome to Cephastock Movie Recaps. Today we delve into the details of Those About to Die Full Season 1, Episode 1 to 10. If you're new to this channel, please do subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. Your support is greatly appreciated, my dear friend. Thank you. The series opens on a desperate bettor indebted to 10x, owner of the largest betting emporium at the Circus Maximus.
You disgust me.
10x orders the man killed over his unpaid debt. Through this brutal moment, we are introduced to the famed racetrack and the four powerful factions that control its shares. Rome, on one time an inspiration of civilization, is now plagued by the weakening of corruption, with citizens caring only for food and games. The people bet eagerly on the four chariot racing factions, each owned by wealthy senators. 10x hints that change is coming, one that might shake the very foundations of the arena and the city.
Garbo.
Those who die in the races are later sold to feed the beasts kept in cages. After Emperor Nero's suicide, civil war erupted across the empire as four generals battled for supremacy.
Flavius Vespasianus.
General Flavius Vespasian emerged victorious, restoring Rome and now constructing the world's largest arena, a project to win the admiration of his people. Emperor Vespasian, alongside his sons Titus and Domitian, unveils the Grand Flavian Amphitheater to the Circus Maximus shareholders. To their surprise, he announces that, unlike the racetrack,
there will be no shares.
Shares in the amphitheater will not be available for purchase. Later, the city's elite discuss the emperor's frail health and impending death.
Threaten our very existence.
They fear Domitian's ascent to power, for unlike his brother Titus, Domitian might prove dangerous to the ruling class.
That would be the end of all of us.
In distant Numidia, a Roman province in North Africa, we meet Kala, a street vendor peddling her wares. Nearby, a Roman soldier grabs alcohol instead of water, becoming intoxicated. Meanwhile, Kala's daughters, Jula and Ora, are home when the drunken soldier assaults them.
Dance.
They defend themselves, killing him in self-defense. Before they can explain, soldiers arrive, arresting the girls and dragging them away. Kala returns to find a trail of blood leading to her empty home. She dashes outside and, to her horror, sees her daughters being taken by Roman soldiers. She quickly gathers what she can to follow them. Elsewhere, in the mountains of Numidia, Kala's son Kwame and his crew hunt lions on behalf of the Romans.
Is off the god.
They manage to capture a white lion, a creature sacred to their people. Kwame prays for forgiveness, pleading to his gods for mercy in taking one of their revered symbols. At Ostia Harbor, 3 Spanish horse breeders led by Elia arrive and begin unloading their prized horses. Elia insists on handling the horses himself after noticing the rough treatment from dock workers. Overhearing a Roman soldier, he learns of a grain shortage that has left the city hungry for 3 weeks. Starving and desperate, the citizens of Rome take to the streets demanding food.
You heard what I said.
Soldiers claim there is none, sparking a violent riot that claims several soldiers' lives.
And he's back! Who cares? Let's go!
The mob, incited by ringleaders whom 10x notices are being paid for their efforts, marches toward the Palatine Hill, home of the emperor. Inside the imperial palace, Domitian is exhilarated by the clamor outside, delighting in the calls for blood. Soldiers hold back the crowd as Domitian and Vespasian discuss strategies to calm the rioters.
We should be here.
Domitian recalls a tactic his father once used during his rise to power, a diversion.
There's a race today.
They decide to distract the mob with a grand chariot race.
Let's see that.
Meanwhile, Titus is away with the conquered queen of Judea, unaware of the chaos.
Another food riot, my lord.
Drawn by the sound of drums, the crowd eagerly heads toward the race.
You two get set for the betting.
Tenex directs his staff to prepare the betting stalls and goes in search of Scorpus, Rome's most celebrated racer. Despite being thoroughly drunk, so Tenex shoves him into a cold bath to sober him up. At the same time, Rufus quietly steals something from his wife Selina. Outside, the famous Scorpus hurries through the streets as fans clamor for his attention, chasing him to his destination. Among the onlookers are the three Spanish brothers, who admire the racer's skill and fame, each dreaming of possessing at least one of his abilities.
Take his woman.
Francois, however, mostly desires Scorpus's women. Scorpus examined his prized horse, Incitatus, inspecting its feed and tack. Moving to the other side, he scowled at the new racing rig prepared for him and demanded his old one be brought back instead.
To victory.
Meanwhile, Elia and his brothers tried to sell their horses to Scorpus' stable master, who turned them down. Undeterred, they found a sympathetic listener in one of the stable workers, Gavros. The brothers revealed that their goal was to sell their 8 horses and use the money to establish a breeding stable back in Spain. Back at the imperial palace, Emperor Vespasian prepared to attend the races. His son, Domitian, urged him to show strength. While the emperor knew the people were desperate for food, he hoped Domitian's strategy to distract them with games would keep them content, at least for now. As senators arrive to take their seats in the arena, we see Rufus, who recently stole items from his wife, approaching a mysterious, witch-like woman. He handed her a strand of hair from Incitatus, Scorpus' horse, asking her in which lap Scorpus would take the lead. The witch prophesied that it would happen in the second-to-last round.
To last round.
At the betting tavern, Hermes, Domitian's lover, placed his bets. He spotted a soldier, Manilius in disguise, but ignored him,
All on white.
instead betting a surprising amount on the white faction. This piqued Tenex and his team's curiosity.
Come back when you have the money you owe.
500 shares of the blue faction.
Soon after, Rufus entered the betting tavern with the goods he had stolen, which originally belonged to his wife, Selina. Confident in the witch's prediction, he bet all 500 shares on Scorpus to take the lead in the second-to-last round, expecting a large payout. Tenex, sensing something amiss, quietly instructed a young messenger to tell Scorpus to wait until the final round to seize the lead. At the same time, a senator backing the white faction ordered his driver, Zenon, to stay focused, as Domitian himself had staked a substantial sum on him to win. Back at home, Selina noticed her 500 shares in the blue faction missing. In the stands, Antonia sat with her husband, though it was an open secret that she was romantically involved with Scorpus. The current champion of Rome, Scorpus had earned a reputation for winning race after race.
Now.
Meanwhile, Domitian and the emperor prepared to make their entrance. As they were introduced, the crowd roared with excitement, which took the emperor by surprise.
After calling for our blood.
Only recently they wanted to kill them, yet now they cheered for the race. Grateful to Domitian for his bold strategy, the emperor remarked that it's wise to keep one's enemies close. As the race's opening ceremony began, each of the 8 racers, representing 4 factions with 2 drivers each, was introduced. Scorpus, the greatest of them all, raced for the blue faction, while Zenon, the second-best charioteer, competed for the white. Scorpus, famous for taunting his rivals, used his provocative tactics, preparing to unnerve his competitors before the race. With a thunderous cheer from the crowd, the race began. 8 charioteers launched into a brutal contest, circling the vast Circus Maximus. This race was life or death, and each charioteer knew the stakes. Amid the fierce competition, a catastrophic accident occurred, claiming the lives of 2 drivers, including Scorpus' teammate from the blue faction. General Titus Flavian has returned from his entanglement with the Judean queen, and the emperor is furious over his behavior. As the race continues, Domitian seizes the moment to undermine Titus, criticizing his irresponsibility to make him appear weak in front of their father. The race reaches its final lap, and Scorpus urges his best horse, Incitatus, to surge forward. Known for his reliability, Scorpus does not disappoint, claiming victory as the crowd erupts in cheers. But not everyone shares in the celebration. Rufus is devastated. He has just lost his wife's 500 Blue Faction shares after Scorpus failed to take the lead in the second-to-last round as the witch had predicted.
Father, let me explain.
The Emperor counsels Titus to remain patient, assuring him they will address matters privately. In the ensuing chaos, Domitian has gained the upper hand over his older brother, even though he, too, lost a considerable bet. Tenex is the happiest of all, having won Rufus 500 shares of the Blue Faction.
Our patience has paid off.
He rewards the witch for misleading Rufus and then goes to meet Scorpus, who is solemnly honoring his fallen teammate.
You just got lucky.
Zenon, another racer, dismisses Scorpus' victory as mere luck, but Scorpus reminds him that luck is part of the game. Tenex then proposes that he and Scorpus establish their own racing faction with their earnings, but Scorpus is skeptical. The four established factions have held control for centuries, and as members of the lower class, they lack the influence to challenge the status quo.
Our citizens do not starve to death.
At the Imperial Palace, the Emperor scolds Titus for failing to secure the grain supply, which led to the recent riot. He hints that Domitian, not Titus, might become his successor and instructs Titus to end his involvement with the Judean queen. Meanwhile, we see the queen visiting the workers' camps, observing the conditions of her people, all without Titus' knowledge. The Emperor urges his son to focus on his responsibilities, saying he would prefer a soldier over a politician as his heir. At the African port of Leptis Magna, Kwame is selling the white lion he captured when he spots his sisters among the captives.
My sisters!
He attempts to free them but is quickly apprehended and arrested by Roman soldiers.
Bring him as well.
Later, Titus goes to visit the queen, only to find her preparing for his arrival. He informs her of his father's command that she must leave.
Tell me to send you away.
She responds that if that's what he truly wants, he should send her away himself. Titus hesitates, uncertain.
I will not be the one to hand them the knife.
Meanwhile, Kala has tracked her daughter's trail to the port of Leptis Magna. She arrives just as captives are being selected. Some are condemned to labor in the mines, while others are chosen to be gladiators or household slaves. She advises her 3 children to aim for household service, believing they'll have a better chance to eventually buy their freedom. Kwame, initially rejected for his small stature, demonstrates his strength by overpowering other gladiator candidates, impressing the Roman slave trader. To secure his acceptance, Kwame requests that his sisters also be taken as slaves to Rome.
Only if my sisters come.
Kala is determined to follow her children, believing that their freedom can one day be bought in Rome. Back in Rome, Scorpus inspects his fallen friend's chariot and discovers that its wheel was sabotaged. Tenex leaves his guards outside and steps into a hidden chamber, adding the Blue Faction shares to his growing cache of assets.
You can leave.
He notices a small metal horse left by someone, triggering memories from his past. Suddenly sensing movement, he suspects someone is watching him and draws a knife, only to be startled by a knock at the door. Scorpus stands outside and Tenex nearly stabs him. Scorpus demands an investigation into his sabotaged chariot, warning Tenex not to take him lightly.
Don't take me for granted.
Meanwhile, Elia and his brothers visit the Blue Faction stable, where Scorpus agrees to test ride their horses the next day. Gavros leads them to one of Tenex's boarding houses for accommodations.
One of Tenex's.
The caretaker asks for 9 sesterces per month from each of them.
9 sesterces a month.
But Francois, having spent most of his money on women, only has 2. His brothers force him to sleep on the floor as a result. Tenex then visits a chariot maker's shop to confront him about the sabotage. One of the maker's daughters recalls seeing a red-haired man tampering with a chariot. Tenex immediately recognizes him. Lucius, the man he saw accepting a bribe to start a riot. When Tenex corners Lucius,
What do you want?
the latter reveals he was working for someone much more powerful.
Perhaps this person will protect you.
Tenex suggests sarcastically that Lucius should rely on his patron's protection, already suspecting who the real mastermind is. Tenex plans to deal with this powerful figure soon. General Titus decides to defy his father's wishes and allow the Judean queen to remain in Rome.
Stay here.
Back at Scorpus' quarters, Tenex reveals to Scorpus that Domitian orchestrated the sabotage, likely because of the large bet he placed on the White Faction.
Why would Domitian need monies?
This suggests Domitian has debts to settle, which could work to Tenex's advantage in his plans to start a new faction, especially since Domitian would have to grant the necessary permission. In Rome, newly arrived slaves witness the brutal punishments for disobedience. Kwame is separated from his sisters, which torments him. Meanwhile, the slave trader brings the white lion to Carpo, the animal caretaker in Rome, who is impressed yet unnerved when Kwame warns that the lion carries spirits.
You should fear.
Kala arrives in Rome shortly after. She goes to a jeweler to sell her pearls, hoping to gather funds for her children's freedom. But Lucius and his gang spot her and corner her in an alley, robbing her of her pearls and money before scattering as soldiers approach. In the city, Kwame and other slaves glimpse the massive arena under construction. Inside, a formidable gladiator named Flamma easily defeats new recruits in a training bout, showing his respect to Domitian. As Kwame's group is brought in, he's initially rejected due to his size.
Too light.
However, after the slave trader mentions Kwame's feats, Domitian decides to test him by pitting him against Vigo.
Vigo!
Kwame proves himself in the fight, but Domitian, displeased with the result, goads him with insults. Kwame lunges at Domitian but is restrained by guards. Domitian decides to keep him, planning to have him face Flamma in a lethal match. Meanwhile, at the Circus Maximus, Scorpus test rides the Andalusian horses and is thrilled by their speed.
And no whip. You run better with.
They're fast.
He strikes a deal to buy them, but this requires the brothers to stay in Rome.
Accept both offers.
Elia is hesitant, though his brothers assure Scorpus that they'll convince him.
I am not faulting. I'm leaving.
Scorpus informs Tenex of the horse purchase and reaffirms his commitment to starting a new faction,
Of course I'm in.
alarming members of the Blue faction, as Scorpus used Tenex's money for the deal instead of their own as usual. Later, Tenex visits Marsus, the husband of Antonia, and sells him 500 Blue faction shares, securing Marsus majority ownership over the current lead owner, Coltonia.
Why did he sell to us and not to her?
Antonia, meanwhile, had noticed Scorpus acquiring horses, suspecting he might be planning to branch off. With the funds from the sale, Tenex goes to Domitian to propose the establishment of a fifth faction, offering Domitian half ownership. With Scorpus as the lead racer and the newly acquired Andalusian horses, Domitian considers the offer, especially since he needs the money.
They're all dangerous.
I'm enjoying this.
That night, Kala confronts Lucius while he is drunk, attempting to recover her stolen pearls. However, he has already sold most of them and can only give her a small portion back.
That's all that's left.
Meanwhile, in another part of Rome, someone breaks into Tenex's stables and poisons all his horses. Elia and his brothers argue heatedly, with Elia still trying to persuade his brothers to leave Rome. Gavros spots them in distress after noticing the horses suffering from the poison.
Come.
At the palace, Emperor Vespasian summons Titus and Domitian to declare his succession. He names Titus, the soldier, as his successor, leaving Domitian fuming. Domitian storms out and the emperor watches, troubled. Later, Domitian begins conspiring with Hermes, resolving to bide his time before acting against Titus. Elsewhere, Scorpus, caught up in his excitement, accidentally reveals to his tailor the plans for their new faction, a secret that was supposed to remain closely guarded. Tenex and Scorpus rush to the stables, horrified to find that their horses have been poisoned. The timing couldn't be worse. Domitian is on his way to inspect the horses.
I have no time for this. Where are they?
Thinking quickly, the Spanish brothers rig a sling to support one of the horses, claiming it's an old technique from their homeland.
Spanish technique, Your Highness.
Domitian, convinced, agrees to let Tenex establish a new faction in exchange for a 50% share.
This now has 5 factions.
He needs the funds to bolster his position against his brother Titus, who has been crowned the next emperor.
Make you one of my clients.
Domitian also makes Tenex one of his clients, tasked with safeguarding his interests. A veterinarian examines the horses and confirms they were poisoned with nightshade. They're unlikely to survive.
If you tell it.
Tenex warns the 3 brothers not to breathe a word of this to anyone, threatening severe consequences if they do. Francois, one of Elia's brothers, wants to flee, but Elia, loyal to his horses, insists they stay. Desperate to save the horses, Tenex and the others decide to try yellow ash, known to be a mild poison but one that Scorpus swears once helped cure a horse. Scorpus and Andrea, one of the Spanish brothers, set off for Pompeii to retrieve it and consult the physician who had administered it before. Meanwhile, Tenex visits an apothecary to investigate who purchased the nightshade. His search leads him to a poisoner who identifies two men involved in the scheme. Tenex and his men ambush the pair, killing one and interrogating the other, who reveals the location of the carriage used by the orchestrator of the plot. Tenex sends out scouts to track it down. When one of the poisoned horses dies, Tenex instructs Gavros to look for replacements. Meanwhile, Francois urges Elia to leave Rome,
I am not leaving.
but Elia refuses to abandon his favorite horse, Ferox, in its suffering.
Go.
That same day, Francois encounters Selina, who is moving into a modest apartment with her child after separating from her husband, Rufus, who lost their 500 shares of the Blue faction in a bet, leaving them broke. Francois helps her carry her belongings upstairs, and they strike up a friendship. Following Tenex's orders, street children spot a carriage with green and gold stripes in the forum and trail it to its destination. One child runs to inform Tenex,
Go get Tenex.
who is out purchasing rigs for the new faction. He immediately goes to investigate the location. At the forum, crowds gather for a slave auction. Among those on the block are Kala's daughters, Jula and Aura. As the auction proceeds, Tenex arrives and pays off the children for their information. He observes the carriage's owner, Antonia, who also happens to lead the Blue faction. Kala tries to buy her daughter's freedom but is quickly outbid by Antonia, who wins Jula for 3,000 sesterces. When Aura is put up for auction, Tenex acquires her for 500 sesterces, using fraudulent means to prevent Kala from bidding.
1,000!
Sorry.
Back at his residence, Aura considers threatening Tenex in his own home, but he warns her of his power, making it clear that she's now his slave. When there's a sudden knock at the door, Tenex, wary, opens it with a knife in hand, only to find Kala, who has come to negotiate. Kala proposes a deal. In exchange for her daughter's freedom, she'll ensure Jula spies on Antonia and the House of Marsus for Tenex. As the mediator, Kala will provide Tenex with valuable information, and he in turn will refrain from harming Aura and eventually sell her freedom once his goals are met. Tenex agrees to the terms. Elsewhere, Vigo seeks out Kwame, offering to teach him how to fight against stronger opponents if Kwame will teach him Roman sword techniques. Vigo also explains the significance of the rudis, or wooden sword, symbolizing freedom for a gladiator. If a gladiator entertains the crowd well enough, Vigo says, the people may demand he be given the wooden sword, granting his freedom. Kwame agrees, driven by his desire to free his sisters, and to kill Domitian, whom he mocks as having the eyes of a hyena. Vigo, amused, promises to help him achieve both goals.
That's what we will do.
On the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, Scorpus, joined by a physician and one of the Spanish horse breeders, Andrea, collects yellow ash to treat the poisoned horses. Despite the threat of earthquakes, they hurry. Andrea suggests strategies for Scorpus to consider in his upcoming race and mentions his own dream of becoming a horse racer. Back in Rome, Elia remains focused on his prized horse, Ferox. Gavros soon brings bad news. Another horse has died. Kala questions one of the servants about Tenex, overhearing that he's seen as neither purely good nor evil. She learns that his main demand is to gain ears within the households of Marsus and Antonia. Stopping at the market to buy some red berries, Kala heads to Marsus' house, where Antonia is inspecting her daughter Jula to ensure she's unharmed. Drusilla, a servant in the household, seems disapproving of Antonia's treatment of Jula. Guided by one of Tenex's servants, Kala is brought to Marsus' residence, where she is allowed to see her daughter. Drusilla sends Jula to the kitchen, where she and Kala embrace. Kala gives Jula the red berries and whispers instructions.
My son is in Roma's.
Afterward, she asks Tenex's servant where she can find her son, Kwame, who is now a gladiator. The veterinarian refuses to help Tenex and Scorpus administer the yellow ash, arguing it's poisonous. At the Ludus Magnus, Vigo trains Kwame in the use of the trident and net, common tools for gladiators.
Fine still.
Learn from the prey, not from...
Afterward, Kwame opens up about how his father died in a Roman war in Nubia.
My father fought for the wrong Roman.
In turn, Vigo shares his own story of surrendering to the Romans to protect his family, who are now enslaved in Rome.
Cooking a rock.
As the next chariot race approaches, Cologne, another gladiator, is scheduled to fight Flamma. Kwame and Vigo will serve as his armigeri, responsible for retrieving any severed body parts after the match.
Is there a way to enter?
Kala, hoping to see her son, persuades a Syrian guard to let her into the Ludus Magnus. She finds Kwame, advising him to stay calm and strong while updating him on his sisters.
Watch out.
Before she can be discovered, she hurries away. In the baths, Domitian confides Hermes about his resentment towards his brother, Titus, who used to bully him as a child and will likely become even more tyrannical as emperor.
When I was a boy, he tormented me.
Domitian warns that if Titus kills him, his companion would likely share his fate. Another horse dies, and Elia and his brothers prepare to leave Rome.
No reason to stay now, I suppose.
But stable Master Gavros intercepts them with news that the remaining horses, including Ferox, have recovered. Kala cooks her local dish for Tenex,
African.
who enjoys it and agrees to give her work in one of his betting taverns.
The horses!
Soon after, a messenger brings news that the horses have stabilized, so Tenex visits the Circus Maximus to check on them. Although weak, the horses are slowly regaining their strength. When Tenex mentions they need a second racer, Scorpus hires Andrea, who is thrilled at the opportunity. Meanwhile, Antonia takes Jula to a private chamber, instructing her to wait.
Of course.
From inside the chamber, Jula overhears Antonia telling Marsus that she orchestrated the horse's poisoning and plans to arrange Scorpus' death.
You mind if I arrange his death?
Marsus consents, then enters Jula's chamber, with Antonia presenting the young girl as a gift. However, when Antonia notices Jula is bleeding, thanks to the red berries Kala gave her, she dismisses her. Jula rushes to warn Kala and Tenex of the plot against Scorpus, before Kala hurriedly returns her to avoid suspicion.
Quickly.
Later that evening at the Circus Maximus, Andrea inspects the track hill race on the next day. Scorpus arrives to do the same, a practice that has contributed to his numerous victories. During the evening meal at Ludus Magnus, Cologne privately asks Kwame and Vigo to burn his body rather than feed it to the tigers if he dies in his fight. When asked how he'd like his own remains treated, Kwame shrugs, saying he likes tigers and doesn't mind if they feed on his body after death.
I like tigers.
On his way back, Scorpus is ambushed by thugs. He fights them off for a while, but they eventually overpower him, stabbing him fatally as horrified onlookers watch. Afterward, Marsus congratulates Antonia on her supposed success, only for her to reveal she hadn't ordered Scorpus' murder. Still, they take satisfaction in his death. Meanwhile, Domitian heads to the imperial treasury under the guise of reviewing the imperial accounts. Instead, he has gold melted down into unmarked bars, which Lucius then uses to bet against each of the four main factions in the upcoming chariot race.
I expect excellent odds.
One of the goldsmiths steals a bar of gold and takes it to Titus' lover, the Judean queen, who immediately informs Titus. The future emperor confronts Domitian, who denies any wrongdoing.
Do not toy with me!
Suspicious, Titus orders an audit of the treasury to verify his brother's honesty. Realizing he has little time, Domitian hopes his upcoming gambling profits will be enough to hire the Praetorian Guard for protection.
Hopefully enough to buy some Praetorians.
Following Scorpus' staged death, Marsus and Antonia meet with Zenon, a driver for the White faction, and persuade him to join the Blue faction. They offer him triple his wages, protection from his previous owner, and the promise that he'll get to drive Scorpus' famous horse Incitatus. Just before the race, Domitian visits Emperor Vespasian, who is visibly frail and declining. The emperor, lost in memories, mistakes Domitian for Titus.
Do what needs to be done.
At the race, Domitian and Titus greet the crowd. Domitian informs Titus that their father is too unwell to attend.
He won't be joining us today.
Titus, however, takes the emperor's seat. Senator Leto of the White faction flies into a rage when he learns his prize driver, Zenon, has been poached by the Blue faction. He immediately orders his workers to find a reserve driver. In the arena, Flamma and Cologne prepare for their fight. Vigo and Kwame sense the intense tension. As the game master introduces them, the brutal fight begins, ending quickly as Flamma decisively defeats Cologne. Kwame nearly attacks Flamma in anger but is restrained by Vigo. Together, they gather what remains of their friend. In the Blue faction's VIP section, Coltonia arrives, only to find that Marsus and Antonia have taken over as lead owners of the Blue faction after acquiring 500 shares from Tenex. Meanwhile, in the catacombs beneath the Circus Maximus, Scorpus awakens. His death was a ruse orchestrated by Tenex to avert future assassination attempts.
If you're dead, no one will try to kill you.
A new faction, the Gold Faction, debuts, stunning the spectators. Tenex, its lead owner, is making history as the first to create a fifth faction, a feat unheard of, especially for a mere bookmaker. When Scorpus appears alive under the banner of the new Gold Faction, the crowd surges to place fresh bets. Even Kala wagers on Scorpus. Domitian explains to Titus that, as Aedile Ludi, he authorized Tenex to form the new faction, and it appears the public loves it.
On Scorpus!
The race begins. Scorpus and Andrea work in tandem, with Scorpus ultimately taking the lead. At a crucial moment, Scorpus calls out to his old horse Incitatus, now driven by Zenon, to slow down. This costs Zenon and the Blue Faction the victory, giving Scorpus and the Gold Faction a triumphant debut.
I'm accounting for the Imperial Treasury to attend.
I'm gonna report everything you did to...
After the race, Zenon angrily accuses Scorpus of foul play. As Tenex collects his winnings, the other faction leaders watch in disapproval. Lucius receives Domitian's share of the prize, while Tenex's associates celebrate their successful day.
2,000 sesterces.
Kala uses her winnings to buy her daughter Aura's freedom, sensing that Tenex's troubles are far from over. Tenex agrees to the arrangement. However, anger from disappointed bettors soon erupts into brawling at Tenex's betting shop, forcing him to close it down. The fights escalate into riots, with fires breaking out across Rome. From a distance, Kwame and Vigo watch as they burn Cologne's body. Meanwhile, Titus receives the results of the treasury audit. Lucius, disguised as a Roman legionary, has already covertly returned the missing funds. To Titus' surprise, the audit shows no discrepancies.
Go here, to the last dinar.
In the palace, Vespasian rings his bell and solemnly announces to his attendants that his death is near.
Take me to the middle of the room!
He instructs them to bring him to the center of the house, declaring that the Emperor of Rome should die standing, to ascend to divinity. He passes away shortly afterward, and his sons arrive only after his death. Titus orders the servants to place him in his bed, where he mourns silently, bidding his father farewell. Domitian too feels the weight of loss. The riots continue, claiming around 200 lives amid the chaos. Emperor Titus convenes the faction leaders, all of whom are senators, to discuss the violence stemming from the games.
Thing was stable.
They place the blame on the newly created Gold Faction, citing the long-standing tradition of having only 4 factions. Titus agrees to disband the Gold Faction but asks the senators to honor his father's legacy by supporting his deification. Meanwhile, the Gold Faction is celebrating when Roman soldiers arrive with bad news. They tear down the gold banners, announcing that Emperor Titus has abolished the faction. Disheartened, Scorpus tells Tenex he can't remain in a failing faction. As they argue, Senator Leto, owner of the White Faction, arrives to reclaim his stolen racing rigs. Frustrated, Scorpus formally quits, signaling the end of the Gold Faction.
One more Gold Faction for Scorpus.
The next day, crowds gather for Emperor Vespasian's burial and the coronation of General Titus Flavian. During the ceremony, Kala learns about the Vestal Virgins and their power to free slaves with a mere touch.
Can set a slave free.
Among them is Antonia's daughter, taken to serve reluctantly at the age of 7.
How could a mother do that?
Titus, caught up in memories of his father's advice about using wealth to manage an empire's uncertainties, is interrupted by Domitian, who wakes him for his speech.
Brother.
Titus then announces a grand reconstruction project for Rome's public baths.
You're the greatest public baths!
After the ceremony, Titus's wife, Queen Berenice of Judea, meets him, voicing her objections to the project, fearing it will rely on enslaved Judeans, contradicting Titus' earlier promises to free them upon his ascension. Once Berenice departs, Titus's general arrives with updates.
The rioting has been quelled.
But rumors circulate of Domitian's involvement in the recent grain shortages and unrest.
Love your mistress more than you should.
He also points out public disapproval of Titus' relationship with the Judean queen. Meanwhile, Domitian receives troubling reports about the suspicions linking him to the grain shortages.
We have a problem.
At Tenex's betting tavern, Kala has taken on a new role as translator and manager, having noticed language barriers were slowing business. Tenex is impressed, despite the gold faction's removal from the betting boards. Then, a soldier summons Tenex as Domitian wishes to speak with him. In their meeting, Domitian seeks Tenex's help in quelling rumors about him in exchange for an attempt to restore the gold faction.
I'll do what you ask.
Berenice, suspecting Domitian's activities, begins making inquiries about Tenex.
Need to know more about him.
Soon after, anyone with evidence against Domitian is found dead, including Lucius, who is tortured before being killed. Titus confronts Domitian about the rumors and the sudden deaths of every witness. He suspects Domitian intended to shame him in front of their father, but Domitian denies this. Titus orders Domitian to remain confined to his quarters until he can investigate further.
No, till I've found the truth of the matter. Leave me.
When the general asks if Titus believes Domitian's denial, Titus replies that he needs to dig deeper into the matter.
They are at sea.
Domitian's lover grows worried about him. He informs him of growing Judean resentment toward the queen for residing with Titus, hinting at potential unrest. Domitian decides to use this information to his advantage, sensing an opportunity to exploit the tension. Meanwhile, Kala, upon learning that Antonia's daughter is a Vestal virgin, becomes curious about her influence. She instructs her daughter to gather information on Drusilla's whereabouts.
Partnership is too valuable to end.
Scorpus, hoping to rejoin the Blue faction as a driver, approaches them but is coldly rebuffed. Marsus and Antonia declare that Zenon, now under their employ with triple Scorpus' previous pay, is a more reliable choice. At the same time, Cultonia visits Selena, the wife of Rufus, who had illicitly sold 500 shares of the Blue faction.
I warned your father to...
Once a wealthy woman, Selena is now destitute after marrying Rufus. Cultonia offers to take legal action on her behalf, assuring Selena of her support and a place to stay.
We will get them back.
Back at the chariot shop, Tenex places an urgent order for 2 chariots within 2 weeks. The craftsman has 2 ready but warns they're too light to pass inspection. Tenex assures him he'll handle it.
Together, just like you Romans.
Later, Scorpus invites the other faction leaders, hoping to secure a higher-paying position than Zenon's. 2 factions decline, unable to meet his demands,
Me with one bidder.
I profit by being smart.
leaving him with Senator Leto of the White faction. Scorpus negotiates with Leto, ultimately agreeing to 1/3 of his original asking price. Leto consoles him, saying they'll publicly claim he earns more than Zenon.
Tell the world it was $1,000,009.
Later, Tenex approaches Scorpus, trying to persuade him not to leave the Gold faction.
I met with Ida Ludi.
He assures Scorpus that the faction will be reinstated soon. However, Scorpus informs Tenex that he has already signed with the White faction, which angers Tenex. Despite his frustration, he lets Scorpus go. As Passus, the game master, brainstorms ideas for the upcoming games, he devises a plan involving the White Lion captured by Kwame.
Ghost Lion.
Domitian finds the idea appealing, but he is confined to his chambers and must devise a way to escape to see the lion. He wraps himself in a blanket and sneaks to the bathroom, where he switches places with Hermes, allowing him to slip away unnoticed. Once in the basement where the lion is kept, Domitian is captivated by the hungry beast and decides to name it after his brother, Titus Flavian, the conqueror of Judea. His plan is to capture the rebellious Judeans working on the construction sites, who are plotting to kill their queen due to her affair with Emperor Titus, and feed them to the lion in front of the masses. To execute this scheme without Titus catching wind of it, Domitian enlists General Manilius, who is in debt and has been betting illegally, an activity prohibited for soldiers. Domitian exploits Manilius's weaknesses, instructing him to capture the rebellious Judeans for the game scheduled for the following day. The captured Judeans, including men, women, and children, are caged. Carpo, one of Domitian's associates, speaks to their leader, explaining that the lion won't attack unless provoked, suggesting that the leader should sacrifice himself for the others.
Somebody charges the beast.
On the day of the games honoring Titus, a mock Judean castle is erected in the Circus Maximus arena. Domitian, restless and confined to his chambers, grows increasingly impatient. Berenice, the Judean queen, occupies the seat designated for the Roman queen, despite public disapproval.
How can he allow Berenice to sit next?
The games commence with a symbolic reenactment of the conquest of Judea, which disturbs Berenice as she witnesses the mock destruction of her city. To her horror, the portrayal includes the queen herself being represented alongside her captured subjects, an act orchestrated by Domitian to provoke Titus. As the lion approaches, Berenice realizes she is about to see herself devoured. She pleads with Titus to intervene and save her people,
Do something.
but he is powerless to act. Unable to endure the spectacle any longer, Berenice storms out of the arena, prompting Titus to shout in frustration. As he exits, he spots Domitian at the top of the arena, laughing mockingly. Domitian returns to his chambers, only to be confronted by Titus, who slaps him in outrage. This time, Titus believes Domitian has crossed the line. When Titus threatens him, Domitian claims that the Judeans were planning to kill Berenice, justifying his actions by saying he killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Titus is skeptical but chooses to leave the matter for now.
I would.
Later, Berenice resolves to leave despite Titus's pleas for her to stay. She is appalled at having witnessed such brutality. Titus tries to defend himself, asserting that those killed were indeed plotting against her, as Domitian had claimed. However, Berenice is unconvinced by his brother's deceitful words. She agrees to remain on one condition.
You must take a Roman one.
Titus must take a proper Roman queen, one the public would accept, and keep Berenice in the shadows as she believes they will never accept her. Meanwhile, at the tavern, Calla impresses Tenex with her translation skills, which have generated a significant amount of revenue. Tenex praises her ability to disarm people and manipulate them. In light of her contributions, Calla negotiates for a higher wage for herself and her daughter, Aura. She warns Tenex that if he doesn't comply, she will take her skills to other betting houses. Left with little choice, Tenex reluctantly agrees to raise their wages.
You'll do well in Rome.
Later, Calla meets her daughter, Jula, and follows Drusilla to the Temple of Vesta. There, she encounters Antonia's daughter, now a Vestal virgin, and asks for her assistance in freeing her children. Although the priestess cannot grant this request herself, she promises to speak to her matron on Calla's behalf. Elsewhere, Tenex is confronted by a former slave, Ursus, whom he abandoned to die in a fire during their childhood. Ursus accuses Tenex of murdering his master, and under Roman law, the penalty for such a crime is crucifixion. The two engage in a tense and brutal fight. After a long struggle, Ursus ultimately decides to spare Tenex's life but vows to ruin him by taking all the money he earns. In a flashback, we see Tenex and Ursus during their childhood. One night, they wake up, grab candles, and set their master's room on fire. By the time he wakes up, it's too late. They've locked him inside and he perishes in the flames. Unfortunately, falling embers and burning would separate them, with Ursus caught in the fire while Tenex flees for his life. Awakening from a terrifying dream, Tenex clutches a dagger, revealing burned scars on his back that echo the traumatic incident. As Calla prepares to open the betting tavern, she finds a letter pinned to the door. She brings it to Tenex, who cannot read, and asks her to read it for him. The letter, from Ursus, demands that Tenex deposit all his betting earnings at a specified location or face exposure.
All of your winnings, it's the price of my silence.
Enraged, Tenex burns the letter and instructs Calla not to tell anyone.
Every betting tub.
He then orders his men to find Ursus immediately and asks Felix, one of the children he cares for, to discreetly check the address given by Ursus after he finishes eating.
Thank you.
I found it.
One of Tenex's men spots a man with scars, but upon closer inspection, he realizes it isn't Ursus. Tenex instructs his men to continue searching. Meanwhile, Felix, trying to remain inconspicuous, sees Ursus. However, as he heads back to report to Tenex, Ursus follows him. Back at the Circus Maximus, the races are underway, with Zenon representing the blue faction and racing the fastest horses. Tenex, feeling restless, decides to watch the final round as Scorpus finishes in 3rd place. The owners of the blue faction cheer for Zenon's victory, while Scorpus fumes at his loss.
Zenon is earning his salary.
Tenex attempts to console him, but Scorpus is uninterested. Suddenly, disaster strikes.
Something has happened.
Tenex rushes back to discover that Felix has been found dead, hanged in the betting tavern. It hits Tenex that the situation has escalated to a grave level. Scorpus, who has never experienced such a defeat, drinks heavily and soon falls asleep. That night, Felix's burial takes place. His sister mourns for him, lamenting that he was the only one who knew their mother before she died, although Calla tries to comfort her. Tenex deeply regrets sending Felix on such a perilous mission.
Should have known.
Realizing he must comply with Ursus's demands to avoid further harm, Tenex and his men gather all his earnings and head to the location specified by Ursus. He instructs the children to hide and observe the situation more carefully than Felix had.
Careful.
Calla is surprised to find Tenex praying, but he tells her that, as a gambler, he always tries everything. Unable to sleep, Kala confides in him that she needs someone to talk to. 10X reveals that he was once like Felix 20 years ago, growing up in a ghetto where they scrounged for food and slept in piles, seeking warmth and safety.
I scavenged.
He recounts how he clawed his way out of that life through hardship, enduring beatings and stabbings and fixing races, where the goal was simply to rise or die, the Roman way.
Sleep.
Scorpus has just awakened when Zenon declares that if having fun turns him into someone like Scorpus, he wants no part of it. Meanwhile, Selena, Rufus's wife, and their son leave to stay with Coltonia, aided by Francois, Elia's brother, who shares a mutual attraction with her.
Ready?
Yes.
Elsewhere, Kala decides that Aura should return to their homeland, but Aura insists on staying in Rome to explore her new life, leading to an argument between them. At a chariot training ground, Francois asks Andrea if they should join the Red faction, which is seeking reserve drivers. Andrea urges patience, reassuring his brother that 10X will resolve their issues with the Gold faction. At a Gladiator training ground, Flamma defeats most of his opponents, prompting Kwame to wonder why the crowd doesn't call for a wooden sword for him. Vigo explains that Flamma has already won the wooden sword 3 times but prefers to remain a gladiator, knowing he cannot be beaten. Later, news of the Emperor's secret marriage to his cousin spreads among the gladiators, who learn that Flamma, Kwame, and 2 others will fight in honor of the occasion.
I am sorry, brother.
Meanwhile, one of Zenon's fans decides to follow him to the Blue faction, amusing his royal friends from the White faction. Rufus attempts to plead with a betting tavern owner for credit but is denied. Instead, he blames 10X for rigging the race that cost his wife her 500 shares of the Blue faction. Berenice, the Queen of Judea, calls for Rufus to discuss 10X, asking him to work for 10X in order to gather intelligence about Domitian's plans.
You to ask him for work.
At the Ludus Magnus, Kwame meets Vigo, who is accompanied by his wife and son. They express their sympathy for Kwame, who will soon face Flamma in a match that could mean death. Kwame is surprised to see Vigo praying to his gods on his behalf.
Protect you, my brother.
He appreciates the gesture and believes they will meet again someday. Meanwhile, Marsus and his wife, Antonia, discuss their secret plans to seize control of Rome. Antonia suggests creating a crisis, knowing that the senators tend to turn to Marsus in times of need. However, Marsus dismisses the idea, insisting that they only need a spark to ignite their plans.
Just need a spark.
At Circus Maximus, Rufus follows Berenice's instructions to seek work at 10X's tavern. 10X initially rejects his request, prompting Rufus to plead by kneeling before the crowd.
Please.
Reluctantly, 10X agrees to give him a cleaning job. At the same time, Aura and her mother are devastated as they see Kwame's name against Flamma's on the betting board. Kala begs 10X to intervene for her son, but there is nothing he can do at this moment. She requests that he at least take her to see Kwame before the fight. As the arena event begins, Passus introduces Emperor Titus and his new wife, Empress Marcia, informing the crowd that the granaries are full and there will be no more hunger. Domitian eagerly anticipates Flamma's performance, hoping he will slay 3 men in honor of the Empress.
It's my wife's seat.
Flamma, the massive gladiator, is ready for battle. As 10X and Kala make their way into the arena, Kala embraces Kwame, offering him words of encouragement. She tells him to be strong, to not give up, reminding him that their gods are with him and that he must win so they can meet again. She insists that he repeat his promise that they will see each other once more, urging him to remember that he is the lion who protects their family.
Now it's you again.
The lion that protects our family.
As Kwame steps out into the arena, Kala breaks down in tears for her only son, praying for his survival. In the arena, after the fighters are introduced, Vigo is shocked to see that the 3 opponents are chained together, making it easier for Flamma to defeat them swiftly. The battle begins, but Kwame performs a ritual first, grabbing a handful of sand from the battleground and pressing it to his chest. Domitian is thrilled as the first 2 gladiators are quickly subdued. Now it's Kwame against Flamma. Kwame's gods seem to favor him as an earthquake shakes the arena, giving him the chance to cut his chains. He severs one of the gladiators' feet to free himself.
Shows great valor in the face of certain defeat.
Exhibiting remarkable skill, Kwame handles the colossal Flamma with the assistance of the frequent tremors, impressing the crowd, who begin to chant his name. While Domitian demands a kill, Emperor Titus spares Kwame, much to the crowd's delight as they clamor for more of his fights in the future. Kala and her daughter Aura feel a surge of relief upon realizing that Kwame has survived. However, Tenex warns them that this is just the beginning. The crowd wants to see him fight again and again.
My emperor.
The emperor gives a consolation prize to Domitian to present to Kwame.
This consolation prize.
Neither of them has any fondness for the other. Kwame contemplates grabbing a knife from a nearby soldier to eliminate Domitian then and there, but before he can act, the ground trembles violently, causing an eruption that sends dust swirling throughout the arena. Seizing this opportunity, Antonia declares that the chaos is the spark her husband Marsus has been waiting for to commence their plans to take over Rome.
That is your spark.
A dust storm engulfs the city of Rome. Ilia and his brothers rush to cover the horses, preventing them from inhaling the swirling dust. Everyone, including Scorpus, appears stranded. Emperor Titus decides to accommodate refugees from neighboring cities, leaving no stone unturned in his efforts to extend a helping hand. However, Antonia has extinguished the eternal flame at the Temple of Vesta, resulting in the death penalty for the matron in charge. The extinguishing of the flame is cited as a cause of the god's wrath over the city. Domitian orders a rematch between Flamma and Kwame, aware that Kwame had intended to kill him just before the volcanic eruption. Kwame is imprisoned and denied food, a tactic intended to weaken him.
A special death.
At Marsus' house, Antonia shows him a picture of their son Julius.
It's our son.
Marsus mentions that thousands of refugees are flooding into Rome, and they both agree to strike while the iron is hot. He plans to organize a secret meeting of the Senate to oppose the emperor. Jula overhears their conversation and rushes to Tenex's tavern, informing the servant that it's urgent.
It is urgent.
While Tenex is away, Jula has time to meet her sister Aura and their mother. When Tenex arrives, Jula tells him about the secret meeting of the senators.
All of them?
Yes.
He instructs her to return quickly before anyone notices she's missing. However, they lose their way on the journey back, and Elia volunteers to help Jula reach Marsus' house safely.
Easy to do.
As they travel together, they begin to connect.
Can I see you again?
Meanwhile, Domitian is still confined but manages to sneak out to meet Tenex.
Titus Flavius Domitian.
Tenex congratulates him for provoking his own brother, the emperor, and hints that he can earn back Titus's trust by informing him about the senators' secret meeting. Domitian immediately shares this information with Titus.
You were in jeopardy, as am I.
That night, Senator Marsus makes his move to join the other senators, unaware that his plans are no longer a secret. Tenex follows him from the shadows, waiting for the arrival of Domitian and Emperor Titus. When they arrive, Tenex guides them to an underground tunnel where they eavesdrop on Marsus' treasonous appeals to the Senate. Marsus discusses the extinguishing of the Vestal flame, claiming that they may no longer have the protection of their gods. Unbeknownst to them, it was Antonia, his wife, who extinguished the flame, leading to the death of the matron in charge. Marsus warns that they may be nearing the end of times, citing the calamities that have befallen them. He argues that the true cause lies before them, the new Emperor Titus, who conspires with the Judean queen, spreading discord while Rome suffers. He accuses Titus of opening the gates to refugees while the people of Rome starve, calling for change and offering himself as a champion for the citizens.
We'll applaud the change!
Immediately after, Titus orders the arrest of Marsus and all the senators involved in the treasonous act.
Arrest them.
Lord.
As Marsus declares that the time for action is now, Domitian and the generals move in to apprehend him and two other senators, Tyrrell and Sepulsius, for treason, leaving the rest of the senators in a precarious position.
So you drove for the blues and the white.
Meanwhile, Elia and Gavros, the stable keeper, discuss Gavros' past as a racer. Gavros reveals that he left the sport after witnessing too many deaths. He reflects on how he has survived numerous brushes with death, stating that once you start thinking about it, it's often too late. He emphasizes that life rarely goes as expected. At the Ludus Magnus, Vigo manages to sneak food to Kwame in the dead of night. Domitian aims to break Kwame's spirit by denying him food for the 5 days leading up to his fight with Flamma. They discuss the upcoming rematch, and Vigo mentions that the crowd is buzzing with excitement for revenge. They are eager to see Kwame take on Flamma again.
5 days.
Domitian advises Titus to double the grain rations and reinstate Scorpus in the race through the Gold faction to placate the masses following the recent destruction. Grateful for his brother's counsel, Titus agrees. Domitian is put in charge of organizing the grand inaugural games of the Flavian amphitheater.
Who will be master of these games?
Tenex convinces him to take on the role of master of the inaugural games, arguing that he understands the people and knows what they want. Domitian agrees but wants to see how Tenex handles the execution of traitors.
See how you do with the execution of the...
Later, Scorpus wins the race for the White faction with Tenex watching closely. However, Scorpus is arrested afterward for gambling, as racers are prohibited from placing bets. The arrest is a setup orchestrated by Tenex.
It's not one of your animals.
Furious, Scorpus confronts Tenex, who expresses disappointment in Scorpus for lacking trust in him.
Arrested for illegal bet.
With the gold faction reinstated, Tenex offers Scorpus a chance to rejoin, proposing 25% of the shares. Scorpus ultimately accepts the offer.
Hey, you let me out!
Antonia visits her daughter Cornelia at the Temple of Vesta, congratulating her on her promotion to Chief Vestal. This elevation comes after the matron in charge was executed for allowing the Vestal flame to go out. However, Cornelia is unimpressed by her new status. Antonia explains that she needs Cornelia's help to save her father, Marsus, who has been arrested for treason.
I am no longer his daughter.
Cornelia refuses, expressing her disappointment in her parents for forcing her into the Vestal Virgins, which she views as a prison.
Did you get my letter?
At Marsus' house, Ilia manages to sneak over the fence to meet Jula, Kala's daughter. Their attraction to each other deepens, and Ilia feels a strong desire to steal her away from her masters, but he knows that doing so could result in Jula being crucified. He suggests paying her masters for her freedom, but he doesn't have the 3,000 sesterces for which she was bought. They embrace, feeling they should pause, but Jula wants to experience her first time with him.
I don't know how we should feel either.
At Circus Maximus, Tenex acquires special lightweight chariots. By adding water for weight, he ensures they pass the examination process.
Approved.
Unsurprisingly, Scorpus wins every race that follows. Scorpus and the Gold faction triumph in the race.
Scorpus makes his move again. Could be...
Before the race starts.
Kala devises a plan to maximize betting revenue by allowing wagers during the games, even though it's prohibited. They just need to be discreet. Tenex receives a signal from Ursus to deposit the money.
Your boys will continue to die.
Meanwhile, Domitian summons Tenex for a discussion, insisting on his share of the profits.
Big bets are made on credit.
Tenex explains that large bets are made on credit but assures him he will receive his share soon.
You stole my driver.
At the same time, Senator Leto complains that Tenex has stolen his driver. Tenex is too busy to deal with such nonsense.
I'm not busy, man.
Scorpus also demands payment from Tenex.
Have it on credit.
But Tenex has no time for this. He rushes to where the money is kept, asking the kids if they have seen Ursus, but they haven't.
Anything?
Not yet.
Kala visits Cornelia, but Cornelia already knows about Kala's association with Tenex, a known criminal, and refuses to help her.
I only do it for my children.
She tells Kala that for dealing with criminals, she is unworthy of her intercession, but Rome is not. With no help for her children, Kala begins to reconsider her association with Tenex. Meanwhile, Aura steps into a world of passion and desire. She enjoys the street music, dances, and eventually finds someone to fall for. Elsewhere, Ursus makes his way to the location where the money is stored. The kids hear the door bang and wake up, peeking at Ursus's movements. One child runs to alert Tenex, but Ursus notices. The child reaches Tenex and informs him of the situation.
Big man, with scars on his face.
Tenex and one of his men go to confront Ursus. They make their move, but Ursus is aware of their presence and watches them closely. As Ursus exits the building, Tenex and his man follow, leaving the child behind.
Wait here.
They head upstairs, only to be betrayed by Tenex's own man. Tenex is ordered to drop his knife. Ursus appears and Tenex fights his way out, but he is once again captured at knife point. In the chaos, Tenex's man is stabbed in the eye and the fight begins. Ursus mercilessly beats Tenex, breaking his leg in the process. Filled with rage and a desire for revenge, he reveals that their master was his father, who had hidden Tenex as a slave.
Patrician blood runs through.
He taunts before setting the house ablaze. He leaves Tenex to die in the fire, just as Tenex had left him during their childhood. The child they left downstairs runs for help. Meanwhile, after some time, 10X is rescued by the children and some of his trusted men, along with Kala. Kala instructs the men to call for a physician immediately as nearby people rush to extinguish the fire. Elsewhere, Aura awakens after a night of joy. She sneaks out, careful not to wake her companion. Making her way to a nearby fountain to freshen up, she hears a deep voice behind her. It's Ursus, though they do not yet know each other. In the meantime, 10X is brought to his bed, where the physician arrives to treat his injuries, administering a tincture of poppies to ease his pain.
You're going to need it.
The physician and his assistants work on 10X's broken leg, trying to get it back in shape. Overwhelmed by pain, 10X feels faint. The children, sensing his suffering, feel his pain too. Later, his man Daisha arrives to inform him that Noro, one of 10X's men, betrayed him. The physician gives Kala prescriptions for medicine and poppies to administer as needed.
Noro, that treacherous dog.
Daisha feels guilty for not being present during the ordeal. Kala takes charge, instructing Daisha to check if the money is still in its usual location. Daisha hesitates, feeling resentful of her orders, but ultimately realizes that someone must act in 10X's absence. As Kala begins to clean 10X's wounds, she hears heavy stomping and loud knocks at the door. Grabbing a knife, she opens it to find her daughter Aura returning from her escapades. Kala tells Aura to open the bedding as usual and instructs her to mislead anyone asking about 10X, making some believe he's dead and others that he's still alive. After a while, Daisha reaches the location of the money only to find it empty. Ursus has taken everything. Meanwhile, 10X wakes from a troubling dream. Kala reassures him that he is safe now. It is then that 10X reveals to Kala his past with Ursus, how they killed their master and how he left Ursus to burn. Kala manages 10X with great care, even as he insists on more tincture to numb the pain. She remains firm, insisting on adhering to the physician's instructions. Daisha returns with bad news. The money is gone.
It's gone.
Elsewhere, in the prison where traitors are held, Antonia visits her husband, Marsus. She tells him she failed to persuade the emperor to secure his release and that their daughter, Cornelia, refused to help. Antonia feels a pressing need to do something to aid her husband. However, Marsus tells her that the only way she can help is to denounce him and forget he ever existed, in order to protect herself and their son Julius.
No!
At the imperial palace, Berenice chastises Emperor Titus for not keeping his promises.
On to Rome now.
Titus had vowed to free her people of Judea after the completion of the Flavian amphitheater, but he insists that his primary responsibility is to the city of Rome.
I have my duties.
Meanwhile, Antonia returns to her fellow faction leaders and publicly denounces her husband, Marsus, calling him a traitor who has betrayed Rome. She asserts that she has severed ties with him entirely. Though it is difficult for her to say, she does so for the sake of their son Julius.
Let us get down to business.
Elsewhere, Zenon seeks to have some fun for the first time, overwhelming Scorpus with his enthusiasm. They head out to drink, and after a couple of rounds, Zenon becomes quite drunk, babbling aimlessly while Scorpus finds himself distracted by the girls around them.
You're funny.
At the same time, Coltonia and Selena celebrate Coltonia's future success in reclaiming her 500 shares. However, the atmosphere shifts when Coltonia reveals her desire to use Selena. Selena storms off with her child in anger.
Selena!
Back to Scorpus and Zenon. After drinking heavily, Zenon leans in to kiss Scorpus, who is disgusted and shocked but too inebriated to react. Selena and her child walk back to Circus Maximus to meet Francois.
Selena.
With nowhere to go, Francois introduces the boy to Ferox, the fastest horse in the stables. In the meantime, 10X feels a sharp pain in his broken leg that reverberates through his body. Kala administers some tincture to help ease his discomfort while she goes to set up the bedding. Elsewhere, after spending some time with Scorpus, Antonia leaves behind a scorpion, intending it to kill him later. Kala begins a new trend where the children quietly offer reverse odds to those who have lost bets while the games are ongoing. In Scorpus's absence, she entrusts Andrea and Francois as riders for the Gold faction. When Scorpus finally awakens, he narrowly escapes the scorpion's sting. The brothers are ready for the race and it begins. Andrea wins for the Gold faction, much to Scorpus's dismay, who vents his fury on the wall after missing the race.
By a scorpion, it's not my fault.
Scorpus takes his anger out on Tenex, explaining that he was drunk and stung by a scorpion, insisting that it's not his fault for being late. However, Tenex points out that this is precisely why they train alternate drivers for such situations, only fueling Scorpus's rage further. Scorpus isn't the only one in a rage today. Domitian is furious with Tenex for disappearing and failing to pay him as agreed.
I'd hate to discover that rumor were true.
Fearful, Tenex explains that their money is gone. He had to pay someone who is trying to expose him. Revealing this to Domitian proves to be a grave mistake, as Domitian injures Tenex further and warns him to recover the money, or they will face serious problems, including Scorpus too.
What did I do?
At the betting tavern, the children have successfully utilized the reverse odds during the game, so Kala rewards them for their efforts. As time passes, Tenex's wound begins to heal. Kala enters to treat him and reports on how well the kids performed during the race. Tenex becomes anxious, realizing that illegal betting puts them at risk of being shut down if caught. After weighing the potential rewards, he advises the kids to be careful. He instructs them to meet Claudia, his servant, for their rewards.
Come back late.
Meanwhile, Kala learns about Kwame's rematch with Flamma scheduled for the next day. She rushes to a fragrance shop to purchase poison.
Closed.
The salesman is hesitant to sell it to her, but after she offers a tip, he agrees, dubbing it a fool's bets to wager on Kwame's victory over Flamma.
It's a fool's bet.
Kala visits the Gladiator's quarters, catching the guards off guard. Inside, she searches for Flamma's cubicle and finds him in a moment of leisure. When he's not looking, she mixes the poison into his drink.
Flamma!
The next day, Flamma wakes and gulps down the tainted drink. As Kwame is tortured before the fight, Vigo is there to bolster his spirits.
Let's go.
Kala hurries to the arena where, by order of Domitian the Aedile Ludi, Kwame is forced to don armor,
He doesn't wear that kind of armor.
which he is unaccustomed to wearing during battle. Meanwhile, Aura instructs Dacia to search for Ursus near the fountain.
Scars everywhere.
Now is the time for those fated to die. After Emperor Titus is introduced, the Great Flamma is presented, followed by the Lion Killer, Kwame. Kala's heart races with fear for her son Kwame. And then the fight begins. As the battle unfolds, the effects of the poison begin to take hold of Flamma.
Kill him!
Kwame seizes the opportunity and ultimately defeats the giant Flamma, who finds himself in a weakened state this time.
He bleeds!
Kwame triumphantly kills the once undisputed champion and becomes a miraculous hero. Kala's gamble with poison pays off, and she celebrates her victory. When her son leaves the arena, they embrace, unable to believe what has just transpired. Meanwhile, Ursus comes looking for Tenex upon learning that he is still alive. Tenex hears the footsteps and knows he must find a safer hiding place. Ursus breaks in, but Claudia manages to conceal herself. Simultaneously, Tenex hides in his secret chamber. Ursus assumes Tenex has fled and leaves the head of one of Tenex's strongest men, Dacia, as a grim message, declaring that Tenex cannot hide from him forever. Shortly after, Ursus heads to Circus Maximus in search of Tenex. At that moment, Kala is in a heated argument with her daughter, Aura. Aura has decided to stay in Rome, while her mother insists she should return to Numidia. Aura echoes her father's words, stating that a lion always finds her own path, and now she is determined to find hers, just as her mother did. Aura then leaves to meet a friend. As soon as she departs, Ursus is spotted at the tavern. Aura senses something amiss but brushes it off. As Kala prepares to close the tavern,
We're closed.
Ursus confronts her and a fight erupts. Ursus aims to kill Kala swiftly. After a lengthy struggle, Ursus seizes Kala, intent on taking her eye. Just then, a knife plunges into Ursus's neck, courtesy of Tenex. At last, Tenex confronts and eliminates his relentless foe.
Let's go home.
In a flashback to 6 years earlier, Domitian charms his father with his eloquent speech-making. He discusses Emperor Nero and his controversial achievements, notably stealing land from citizens to construct the Domus Aurea, the most opulent palace ever built. Domitian asserts that his father, Emperor Flavius Vespasian, will demolish that house and instead build an amphitheater for the entertainment of the Roman populace. Impressed, his father grants Domitian control of the political wing of the empire.
I'm stunned.
We return to the present at the Flavian amphitheater, where Domitian is overseeing the construction when he is suddenly attacked. He is quickly saved by soldiers, while the Jewish foreman tries to calm him, fearing for their lives. Meanwhile, at Marsus's house, Jula and Elia rush in after a long night spent in the gardens, both late for work. Jula has something important to discuss with Elia when they meet tonight, but Antonia notices her unexpected arrival. Elsewhere, Aura returns from her friend's house, feeling depressed. Her mother asks what's troubling her, and Aura expresses guilt for leaving her mother in danger the previous night when Ursus tried to kill her. At Circus Maximus, Elia returns later. As Andrea prepares for the race, the brothers realize that their little brother has matured, and they all want to meet his girlfriend.
We are happy for you.
Zenon apologizes for the mistake he made while drunk, kissing Scorpus.
Terrible mistake.
Tenex makes his way to the VIP section of the Gold faction. Emperor Titus arrives with good news for the citizens of Rome. The civic baths he promised are under construction, and his wife, the Empress, is expecting an heir. Domitian grows concerned that his brother is learning more quickly than he anticipated. Andrea feels excitement about his rising popularity, while Scorpus is consumed with envy as the race begins. The white and blue faction chariots collide, and tragically, Zenon is among the crushed drivers. Inside, Elia remains at the viewing window as Francois rushes to assist Gavros. Zenon is still on the racetrack as the chariots prepare for the next round. Envious of Andrea's popularity, Scorpus causes a crash that leads to Andrea's death. Zenon and Elia witness the incident unfold, helpless as the horses trample Zenon while Scorpus wins the race. Elia and Francois reach Andrea just before he takes his last breath. This unexpected turn of events shakes everyone to their core.
Each other. Great adventure.
He pushed Andre into the wreck!
Elia punches Scorpus, accusing him of steering left to cause the crash that killed his brother. Scorpus denies it and Francois sides with him.
Your brother knew that!
Feeling unsupported, Elia resigns from the Gold faction. Tenex dismisses the incident as an accident, and Kala shares her disappointment in him.
It wasn't Scorpus, it was...
At the burial ceremony, Kala admits her mistake in allowing Andrea to race in Scorpus's absence. She chastises Tenex for his lack of decency and compassion. Tenex responds that there will always be a Scorpus, but there are more stable drivers out there. After the burial, Elia begins packing his belongings. He's done with the Gold faction. His brother Francois tries to persuade him to stay, arguing that their late brother wouldn't want them separated. Francois also feels a responsibility to Selena and her child, noting that Scorpus has offered him a chance to become a second driver. Elia realizes that Scorpus has now taken 2 brothers from him and leaves. At Circus Maximus, Kwame refuses to eat, feeling he can no longer fight. He is exhausted from being treated like a puppet by the Romans, yet they have only 2 weeks to prepare for the opening of the Flavian amphitheater. Domitian devises a trick to motivate him, firing shots at the other gladiators to provoke a reaction. Kwame remains unresponsive until Domitian threatens to shoot Vigo, his best friend.
I thank you for your gift.
That threat breaks Kwame's resolve, and he reluctantly devours the food. Domitian calls him a dog enslaved to royalty. Meanwhile, Tenex, now the legislator of the Aedile Ludi, organizes the games for the opening ceremony of the Flavian amphitheater. He knows they must provide true entertainment for the masses, planning to flood the amphitheater somehow.
How hard would it be to flood the amphitheater?
Elsewhere, Francois has secured a place for Selena and her child to stay. He feels a sense of purpose for his earnings now, having previously squandered his money on drinking. Meanwhile, Elia contemplates the accident. Gavros didn't witness it, but Zenon did. Elia wants to confirm what Zenon saw. Unfortunately, Scorpus arrives first at Zenon's sickbed. Zenon is suspicious of Scorpus's intentions. Scorpus attempts to bribe Zenon to remain silent about what he witnessed during the race. Zenon boldly confirms that he saw Scorpus kill Andrea and insists he should report himself or else he will not stay silent.
If you can't buy my silence.
Scorpus pleads with him for the sake of his racing career, but Zenon remains resolute.
Now get out!
With no other options, Scorpus ultimately decides to take his life. Immediately after killing Zenon, Scorpus pretends to call for a physician,
Zenon!
feigning concern as he claims that Zenon is not breathing and that the bad news is that he is dead. Elia arrives outside, overhears Scorpus delivering this devastating news and instantly realizes what has transpired. Fueled by rage, Elia and Gavros leave the Gold faction to seek work with the Blue faction. To Gavros' surprise, Elia expresses his desire to race and confront Scorpus. Antonia arrives and takes over the conversation, eager to learn more about the young Spaniard Elia.
I will face him on the track.
When she discovers that Elia is filled with anger and seeking revenge against Scorpus, she hires him despite his lack of experience.
Hatred.
The loss of his brother changes Elia profoundly. He meets Jula, his girlfriend, who longs to see him, but their circumstances have prevented a proper reunion. When Jula attempts to share something important, Elia abruptly ends their relationship, informing her that he plans to return to Spain soon. Jula is left in disbelief at his sudden decision. Senator Leto, the head of the White faction,
I believe your brother Domitian is responsible.
Informs the Emperor that he possesses evidence of Domitian's deliberate delay in grain shipments to incite riots in the city. Leto threatens to dethrone the Emperor, but Titus strikes a deal with him, offering financial benefits from the Flavian amphitheater in exchange for Leto's loyalty. Emperor Titus relays this information to Domitian, urging him to confess if he was involved in the grain delays, as forgiveness may be easier to obtain. Domitian vehemently denies any wrongdoing, but Titus insists that Senator Leto has proof and witnesses already on their way to Rome, with the investigation still ongoing. Later, Domitian confronts Tenex, scolding him for failing to cover up the food delays. In a moment of cold determination,
We killed my brother.
Tenex considers the possibility of bribing the Praetorian soldiers to aid their cause. Meanwhile, Domitian returns to his chambers to find Hermes, his partner, cheating on him. Enraged, he imprisons Hermes for his defiance and kills the man who was with him. Meanwhile, Aura meets her lover and discovers a man mistreating her, implying that she works for him. Aura fights back, beating the bully to the ground and threatening him never to come near her again.
Where are you going?
Unbeknownst to her, her mother, Kala, is watching from a distance. Kala returns home to Tenex, heartbroken, lamenting that she has lost her daughter, Aura, to the temptations of Rome.
She's no longer mine.
Tenex comforts her but hints at his own secrets, suggesting he may not be the scoundrel she believes him to be. He may have patrician blood. Kala, however, argues that blood doesn't matter, while Tenex insists it is everything in Rome, claiming that a man can achieve anything with the right lineage. He reveals that he is about to commit a terrible act.
I have to do something terrible.
When Kala advises him to think about the consequences, he implies that they should share something together, which is far from what she intended.
I didn't say.
Elsewhere, Aura spends time with her lover and discovers gladiator swords hidden under the bed. Her lover claims they belong to her cousin, who volunteered to join the gladiators willingly. She also mentions that there are women gladiators, sparking Aura's curiosity.
But some come there by choice.
Meanwhile, Elia meets Incitatus, Scorpus's former favorite horse from the Blue faction. Elia brings the horse food, trying to establish a bond. He explains that a horse will only run for you if it knows you are allies, not enemies. Later, Tenex makes a deal with a soldier to assassinate the emperor in exchange for a hefty sum of 10 million sesterces. Tenex must deliver the money within 2 days, or the deal will be off and their plans exposed.
2 days.
Back at Circus Maximus, Elia undergoes a test for the upcoming race, proving to be one of the fastest racers, driven by the haunting memories of his brother's tragic death. The following day at Circus Maximus, the crowd eagerly anticipates the race. Tenex pulls Domitian aside to inform him about the 10 million sesterces that Manilius requires to initiate their deal.
It's impossible.
Lacking the funds at present, Tenex proposes a bold idea. They should place all their available money on Scorpus to win the 7th round. If he wins, they will have enough to pay everyone involved.
Yes, let's do it.
Rufus, standing nearby, overhears their conversation. Emperor Titus notices his brother Domitian's unease and inquires about it. Domitian brushes off the concern, claiming he is simply deep in thought. Meanwhile, Elia prepares for the upcoming race, alongside Scorpus and Francois, both racing for the Gold faction. Tenex instructs Kala to place a substantial bet on Scorpus to win the 7th round. Though she hesitates, she ultimately complies with Tenex's orders. Tenex approaches Scorpus to emphasize the importance of winning the 7th round, conveying that their lives depend on it.
Hold it and win.
Scorpus is somewhat skeptical but ultimately understands the gravity of the situation. Tenex also instructs Kala to bet their entire stake at other betting taverns, despite her reservations. He insists on obtaining the betting chits, and after a moment's reluctance, she retrieves them from the upper shelves, giving Tenex the insight that valuable items are often stored in higher places for safekeeping. Meanwhile, Zenon's fans, devastated by his death, temporarily turn to the gold faction as their alternative choice.
Go with gold.
Selena and her son are excited to witness Francois race for the first time. As the racers prepare, Gavros observes a strange dynamic between Elia and Scorpus. Inspired by his newfound understanding of keeping valuables in higher places, Tenex tries to track down the money Ursus has hidden from them. The race begins. Elia races for the blue faction, while Scorpus represents the gold faction. Consumed by jealousy over Scorpus's role in his brother's death, Elia instead allows Scorpus to crash, causing him to fall onto a wooden spike. Tragically, Francois, Elia's brother, also falls victim to the same trap and is severely injured. At the same time, the great Scorpus lies dying on the race ground, shocking the crowd and plunging them into mourning. This becomes a nightmare for Domitian, who has placed all his hopes on Scorpus. Francois, meanwhile, breathes his last, leaving Elia, Selena, and the boy in tears, pleading for him to hold on, but their efforts are in vain.
Foolish thing.
Elia is left with deep regret for his actions but feels powerless to change what has happened. Meanwhile, Tenex misses the race as he follows the trail to find the money Ursus stole from them. Ascending to the rooftop, he searches through various boxes but finds nothing. However, he notices water leaking from a nearby tank. Opening it, he discovers their money hidden inside. Unfortunately, he overhears the devastating news from people on the streets. Scorpus is dead. Eventually, Tenex meets Domitian, who is overwhelmed by the loss, convinced that their situation is hopeless and that they will not survive the day.
Now soon we die.
Tenex reassures him, revealing that he has located the money Ursus took, which is enough to settle their debts with Manilius and the other soldiers. Domitian, filled with relief, tries out the Emperor's seat, exhibiting his usual arrogance. Later, Tenex bids farewell to his late friend Scorpus, placing gold coins over his eyes as he mourns his loss. The great Scorpus is taken for burial, and all of Rome mourns his passing. Simultaneously, Francois' burial occurs on the other side of town. Elia, as he digs the grave, is consumed by regret for his actions. Gavros, Selena, and the child can only express their sorrow and say goodbye. Coltonia visits Selena, apologizing and urging her to pursue legal action. She explains that according to the law, a wife with 3 children is free from her husband's ownership. Together, they can reclaim the 500 shares of the blue faction that Rufus had stolen from her.
What is yours is yours.
Meanwhile, Tenex brings 2 scrolls to Kala, asking her to write identical information on both regarding their mission, to kill Emperor Titus. Tenex pays Manilius, the soldier, signing the deal, with each receiving a parchment as proof to prevent betrayal. If either were to betray the other, both would face execution for treason against the Emperor. Upon returning, Kala jokingly congratulates Tenex for putting himself in danger.
Sword dangling over your head.
He replies that they will share the danger together and shows her the secret chamber where he is keeping the treasonous agreement. Meanwhile, Domitian's lover, Hermes, attempts to plead with the soldiers for an audience with the Emperor, wanting to disclose Domitian's secrets.
Then why don't you beg for me?
In response, Domitian has Hermes' tongue cut out, fearing that he knows too much. Berenice, the Queen of Judea, receives information from Rufus about Tenex's collaboration with Domitian in the Gold faction and their plans to buy Praetorian guards for a specific mission. Rufus instructs her to gather more information from Kala's daughter, Jula, who is a slave in Council Marsus' household. She arrives to meet Antonia, armed with intriguing information. The next day, the Flavian amphitheater opens, drawing massive crowds for the ceremony. At the same time, Antonia sends her personal guard to summon Kala regarding her daughter, Jula.
By Antonia Cornelia.
The Flavian amphitheater fills with people from Rome and beyond. Tenex, now in charge of the games, instructs his staff to be vigilant and to avoid rushing.
Think you may have finally found your calling.
Meanwhile, Kala arrives at the house of Marsus to meet Berenice and Antonia, believing she has been summoned to discuss the possibility of buying her daughter's freedom. However, she soon realizes that her daughter has been used as bait to extract information about Tenex and Domitian. Berenice and Antonia demand proof of Domitian's plans against the Emperor in exchange for her daughter's safety.
How do I know you will keep your word?
Kala agrees to gather the evidence, but only on the condition that they uphold their end of the bargain. At the Flavian amphitheater, Emperor Titus is introduced amidst the reverence of the Vestal Virgins and the enthusiastic crowd of Rome. The Master of Games opens the entertainment with a lively performance featuring dancers and acrobats, and the audience erupts in applause. The music and dance fill the amphitheater with energy as they prepare for the next spectacle. Ready the birds, Tenex instructs, and the crowd eagerly awaits what is to come.
Release them! Release them!
The spectators are captivated.
This is something special.
Even Emperor Titus applauding his brother Domitian for the impressive display. Next, the gladiators, both men and women, are paraded before the crowd, followed by a procession of wild animals. The audience is treated to the most spectacular entertainment they have ever witnessed. Amidst the excitement, Kwame spots his sister Aura among the female gladiators. Meanwhile, Kala hurries to Tenex's secret chamber to retrieve the incriminating evidence against Domitian. Kwame seizes Aura and demands to know why she is there. Aura feels guilty for everything that has transpired in their family. She has sold herself into gladiatorship, ready to fight to atone for her sins. Tenex initiates the next act by flooding the ground floor with water. He then boards a boat to confront the traitorous senators, dressed as Egyptian lords. Marsus pleads for mercy, but Tenex is resolute. It is time for the execution of the traitors. They sail to the center of the arena where the crowd cheers. The Master of Games introduces the condemned. Hermes, bound to the front of the boat, looks desperately at Domitian, hoping for mercy, while Marsus glances at his daughter Cornelia, who is already filled with dread. Meanwhile, Kala instructs Nika the Younger to hold on to the evidence. As she moves to confirm Jula's release from Antonia and Berenice, they present her with Jula, and Kala calls for the evidence from Nika. Berenice receives the proof she needs to accuse Domitian and Tenex. Unfortunately, just as Kala and Jula savor their fleeting moment of freedom, soldiers recapture them, declaring that Jula is property of Rome. Back at the amphitheater, Tenex unleashes a horde of giant crocodiles upon the traitorous senators in the boat. The Master of Games, passes, and the crowd cheer for the spectacle. But Emperor Titus appears unimpressed. Domitian insists that their betrayal must be punished publicly, and the show continues. As the chaos unfolds, Rufus reports to Tenex that the witness to Domitian's crimes has arrived sooner than anticipated. Hermes meets a gruesome fate as he is devoured by the crocodiles, and Domitian feels the weight of the tragedy. Simultaneously, Berenice and Antonia arrive with the incriminating evidence against Domitian. However, women are not permitted to pass through the gate leading to the Emperor's section. Antonia escapes by running around to the other side to enter the amphitheater. Unbeknownst to her, a group of Judean men follows Berenice closely, harboring dark intentions. Antonia reaches the top of the amphitheater, finding a window, only to witness her husband Marsus being torn apart by the crocodiles. Their daughter, Cornelia, is also helplessly watching her father's demise. Meanwhile, Berenice navigates her way to the women's entrance, unaware of the chaos that ensues as the Judean men kill soldiers to gain access to the amphitheater. As the crocodiles are returned to their cages, Tenex approaches Domitian, wanting to discuss urgent matters. The arrival of the witness to Domitian's crime has altered their plans.
So it's over.
Tenex proposes that they kill Emperor Titus immediately so Domitian can prevent the guards from executing Tenex afterward. Domitian calls Titus aside for a private conversation. As he approaches Tenex, knife in hand, he is interrupted by a guard delivering news about the witness's arrival.
Emperor, the utmost important.
At the same time, the Queen of Judea is indirectly pursued by her subjects, who harbor vengeful motives. The general brings urgent news about the witness who possesses evidence proving that Domitian ordered grain delays.
Proof that your brother delayed the...
He refuses to leave until the matter is resolved,
So it's come to that.
encroaching on Domitian's plans. Berenice attempts to reach Emperor Titus with the incriminating proof, but she cannot access him from her entry point. Overwhelmed, Berenice gets stabbed and killed by her own subjects, who have been pursuing her for a while. branding her a traitor for her illicit relations with the Roman Emperor Titus while the Judean people suffer under the Roman rule. The evidence against Domitian and Tenex lies abandoned on the ground. Vigo and Kwame prepare for their fight in the arena, though they have no idea who their opponents will be, as they are the only two gladiators instructed to get ready. They share a deep bond as best friends.
Thank you.
Grateful for the companionship they've enjoyed since their first meeting.
Brother, you seem agitated.
Emperor Titus informs Domitian that they will travel to Ostia after the games to meet the witness awaiting them. Meanwhile, Tenex searches for a solution but uncovers evidence that incriminates him in a plot against the emperor. Realizing that Kala has betrayed him, he grows increasingly concerned. Kala, for her part, arrives at the wrong gate, where women are not permitted entry. However, the children in the vicinity distract the soldiers, allowing Kala and Nika to slip past the guards. As excitement builds in the amphitheater, fans eagerly anticipate Kwame's fight. Passus, the master of games, announces the combatants: Vigo the Northman and Kwame the Lion Killer. They are to face each other to the death for the entertainment of the masses, a shocking twist neither had anticipated. Meanwhile, Kala and Nika rush to the upper levels of the amphitheater. The signal is given to start the fight, but as best friends they cannot bring themselves to harm one another. Instead, they decide to stand back to back, inviting the soldiers to come and test their swords. The crowd boos them, demanding action. Kala spots Antonia at a nearby window and scolds her for not keeping her word. The audience grows restless, longing for a spectacle. Meanwhile,
I expected this.
Domitian has anticipated this moment, having captured Jula, Kwame's sister, and Vigo's son, using them to force the gladiators to fight. The emperor wonders what sort of mind would devise such a cruel tactic.
It's your idea.
With no other choice, they apologize to each other before the fight begins.
No forgiveness is needed.
At the same time, Manilius, the guard hired by Tenex and Domitian to assassinate the emperor, has a change of heart. Now he wants to eliminate both of them and claim their money for himself. Ilia and Gavros share a heartfelt farewell as Ilia prepares to return to Spain. Just then, Nika rushes in with the news that Jula has been used as bait in the arena to compel her brother to fight his best friend. As the battle rages on, Ilia arrives at the arena, helpless to save Jula but intent on witnessing the events unfold. Jula and her mother Kala are overwhelmed by the chaos surrounding them. In the midst of the struggle, Kwame turns the tables, drawing the ire of Domitian. After a long and grueling fight, the crowd begins to appreciate the skill of both gladiators. Kwame seizes a moment to plead with the audience for Vigo's survival, asking them to spare his life. Titus turns to Domitian for guidance on what choice to make.
Mercy.
Domitian opts for mercy, but Emperor Titus, influenced by his conflict with Domitian and viewing the match as a symbol of their own deadly rivalry, ultimately decides to call for a kill, refusing to grant freedom to Vigo. With great reluctance, Kwame is forced to slay his friend. Afterward, Kwame mourns Vigo's loss. As Antonia exits the amphitheater, she declares that she can no longer bear the sight of such brutality. The crowd then demands a wooden sword for Kwame, symbolizing his freedom. And Emperor Titus grants this request with sincerity. Though Domitian would have preferred Kwame remain in chains, Titus defies his brother's wishes at every turn.
Celebrate freedom!
Kwame chooses to pass on the freedom he has earned to Jula, liberating her from slavery. Ilia then approaches Jula, and they prepare to leave together as the crowd applauds Kwame's gesture. Kala is overwhelmed with joy and tears as she reunites with her daughter Jula and Ilia. Tenex walks by, seething with anger at Kala's betrayal, but he has unfinished business to attend to.
I bear your child.
Jula shares with Ilia that she is carrying his child, news that excites him, though she had feared telling him before. Emperor Titus commands Domitian to prepare for their journey to Ostia to meet the witness regarding the alleged grain delays. True to his cruel nature, Domitian orders the execution of Vigo's son after Titus departs. Vigo had urged Kwame to find a way to protect his son, and the decision to kill him deepens Domitian's hatred for Kwame. The boy's mother is seen in the crowd, weeping as Kwame rushes to save him from the arena. As events unfold, Emperor Titus discovers Berenice, the Queen of Judea, lying dead on the ground, but the identity of her killer remains unknown. Kwame gathers with Vigo and his son in mourning. In the meantime, Tenex confronts Manilius for a final showdown, bringing their betrayal to a head. Meanwhile, the lion feigns illness, prompting Carpo to open the door, leading to terrifying consequences. Tenex, a seasoned street fighter, overcomes Manilius, the soldier, and kills him. Afterward, he confronts Kala about her betrayal.
You betrayed me!
As their argument escalates, they hear a lion roar nearby. The lion approaches, forcing them to move clumsily to avoid its path. Kwame urges his mother to stay close to the wall as he prepares to face the lion in a one-on-one fight. They make their way to the arena for more space. There, the lion becomes distracted by the commotion around it, attacking and killing anyone in its way. Meanwhile, Tenex promises to pay Manilius's soldiers a hefty sum to incentivize them to assassinate Emperor Titus. In the arena, the lion feasts on its prey. At the same time, Emperor Titus and Domitian arrive in Ostia to meet the witness. Kwame and his sister manage to redirect the lion's attention to him, facing off the angry beast. In a fierce struggle, Kwame plunges his sword into the lion's chest, and it collapses on him. The guards quickly pull the beast off, and Kwame emerges alive. His mother, Kala, and his sister, Aura, rush to embrace him, celebrating his transformation into a true lion killer.
You and I.
On their way to Ostia, Tenex and his troops plan to rescue Domitian. Meanwhile, the witness reveals to Emperor Titus that Domitian ordered grain delays, inciting several riots. In response, Emperor Titus commands the execution of the mission, insisting it be carried out publicly. Just then, Tenex's troops ambush the guards protecting the emperor, slaughtering them. Left alone, Emperor Titus realizes he must surrender, but he hands his sword to Domitian, challenging him to kill if he is man enough. Titus negotiates with the soldiers,
Whatever he said he'll pay you, I'll pay you.
offering them 10 times what Domitian could provide while his brother hesitates to strike. Outside, Tenex grabs a flag and dips it in water in preparation for a specific maneuver. As Titus tries to persuade the soldiers,
And I'm an honorable man.
Tenex leaps from behind, smothering and killing him before Domitian's eyes. With the mission complete, Tenex and his soldiers bow to Domitian,
Caesar,
who appoints Tenex as Aedile Ludi, the master of the games, before heading to the Senate.
My brother died of natural causes.
Meanwhile, Kwame attends Vigo's funeral alongside Vigo's wife, as they watch Vigo's body and his sons incinerated to ashes. In the Senate, Domitian announces to the senators that Titus has died of natural causes. He declares that the profits discussed with Titus regarding the Flavian amphitheater being shared among the four factions are no longer relevant.
It belongs to the people.
The Flavian amphitheater, he asserts, now belongs to the citizens of Rome. He invites those who wish to verify Titus's death to see his body in the Senate, assuring them that his demise was indeed natural. He warns those who doubt his claim to the throne to remember what happened to the traitorous senators in the Flavian amphitheater. Following these veiled threats, he orders the Senate to rise and applaud their new emperor, which they do, albeit reluctantly. After such a tumultuous day filled with life and death stakes, Domitian expresses a desire to be left alone for the time being. Meanwhile, Kala confronts Aelia, questioning how he plans to provide for their daughter Jula, who is already expecting Aelia's child. At the same time, Tenex summons Kala through Rufus. They meet at the former home of Scorpus, now Tenex's residence. He is surprised by Kala's apparent lack of fear, remarking that he has every right to kill her for her betrayal.
I need to kill you, don't you?
Kala responds calmly, stating that she understands the gravity of the situation.
I would be dead, and Domitian is...
Tenex points out that both he and Domitian would have been dead had the evidence reached Titus. Kala admits her betrayal but insists that she has never lied to him, not once. She explains that when it comes to her children's survival, she would betray anyone without hesitation.
You terrify me.
However, Tenex reveals that his ambitions reach far beyond simply being Aedile Ludi. His true goal is to become the Emperor of Rome.
I need to be watchful of the mission.
Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe to our channel if you haven't and let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. Your support is greatly appreciated, my dear friend. Feel free to click on the next video. Thank you.